Born to Tywin and Joanna Lannister in 266 AC, Cersei and her twin brother Jaime were raised in Casterly Rock of the Westerlands, and were so similar in appearance they sometimes switched clothes and assumed each other's identities in their youth. Inseparable for most of their young lives, they began to experiment with each other sexually until caught by a servant who reported it to their mother, after which they were separated and forbidden from ever repeating their actions. In 273 AC, their mother died, giving birth to Tyrion Lannister. The child, who was born a dwarf, inspired deep resentment and hatred from Cersei and their father Tywin, with only Jaime treating the boy with respect and kindness. As she grew, Cersei began to explore her sexuality with more partners, becoming interested in both boys and girls. Although an offer was made to House Lannister to betroth Cersei to young Oberyn Martell, Tywin refused in the hopes of pairing his daughter with Rhaegar Targaryen, heir to the Iron Throne. Cersei came to fantasize about marrying the handsome prince and becoming queen of the Seven Kingdoms, and was even told the betrothal was to occur at the tournament of Lannisport in 276 AC. During the festivities, young Cersei and her friend Malara Heatherspoon journeyed into the forest and encountered the woods witch Maggie the Frog, who spoke a troubling prophecy foretelling that Cersei would marry a man who would have 16 bastards, while she had 3 golden-haired children of her own. It also stated that Cersei would be queen until replaced by someone younger and more beautiful. Her children would each wear crowns but die young, and that she would be killed by the Valonqar, meaning little brother in High Valyrian. The final prophecy saw the death of Malara Heatherspoon, killed by Cersei later that night to prevent anyone from ever learning what was said. Cersei was then told that King Aerys II rejected Tywin's offer for betrothal to Prince Rhaegar, who was later married to Elia Martell of Dorne. By the age of 15, Cersei was living in King's Landing with her father, and was once again involved romantically with her brother, who came to visit for a time. Eager to have him stay with her, she schemed to have the king bring Jaime into the King's Guard, thereby having him move permanently to King's Landing so they could be together. However, the plan backfired when Tywin saw this as yet another insult by a petty king who had grown jealous of his accomplishments, and so now purposely robbed him of the heir to Casterly Rock. And so Tywin quit his position as Hand of the King and moved back to the Westerlands with his daughter, thereby separating the twins once more. In 283 AC, after the fall of House Targaryen in Robert's Rebellion, Tywin at last was in a position to see his daughter become queen, marrying Cersei to the newly crowned King Robert Baratheon, and cementing an alliance that brought stability and peace to Westeros for many years. Cersei, though still in a relationship with her brother, was excited to be marrying a war hero and king, but Robert proved a poor husband, saying the name of another woman, Lyanna Stark, during their first night together. Cersei then realized he was not the man she expected, and over the years the relationship deteriorated further. Robert, who'd chosen to leave the responsibility of running the kingdom to the Hand of the King, Jon Arryn, spent his time in blissful debauchery, bedding many different women and fathering a number of bastard children. Cersei, meanwhile, continued her incestuous relationship with her brother Jaime and gave birth to 3 pure-born Lannisters, which she passed off as children of her husband the king. On one occasion, the queen truly did become pregnant with Robert's child, but she'd grown so bitter and resentful towards him that she sent for a woman to help cleanse her of the problem. Robert's brother Stannis, seeing all the dark-haired children Robert was fathering and their likeness, found it odd all 3 of the king's legitimate children were blonde, with no discernible Baratheon traits whatsoever. He began to investigate alongside Jon Arryn and came to suspect the children were not of the royal line. However, Jon Arryn soon fell ill and died in 298 AC. Stannis, suspecting the Lannisters poisoned him, left the capital for Dragonstone. The Starks of Winterfell also came to believe the Lannisters were responsible when Jon Arryn's wife Lysa wrote them a letter suggesting they were behind the assassination. In truth, however, it was Peter Baelish, called Littlefinger, who was orchestrating events from behind the scenes, convincing Lysa to poison her own husband, then pitting the Stark and Lannister factions against each other. After the death of Jon Arryn, King Robert and his family traveled north to Winterfell, where he named his old friend Eddard Stark as the new Hand of the King. During their time at the fortress, Cersei laid with her brother in a secluded area of the broken tower, but they were discovered by young Bran Stark, who enjoyed climbing up the walls of the fortress. Jaime, in an attempt to keep their secret relationship from being exposed, pushed Bran from the tower window, leaving him in a coma. With the boy still unconscious, they began their return journey south. But while in the Riverlands, Arya's direwolf Nymeria attacked Prince Joffrey. In order to avoid punishment, Arya released her companion into the wild. However, as a result, Cersei had Sansa's direwolf lady killed in retribution. Once back in King's Landing, a tournament was held in honor of the new Hand of the King. Cersei, however, publicly forbade her husband from participating, an action which Varys suspected was part of her scheme to embarrass Robert and actually provoke him into entering the tourney so he might be killed in the contest. But in the end, Robert was convinced by others not to participate. After the youngest Lannister sibling, Tyrion, was arrested by Catelyn Stark in the Riverlands, Cersei confronted her husband and demanded retribution, insulting the king and questioning his manhood when he refused to act rashly. The king, enraged by her comments, hit her in a burst of anger, but Cersei merely replied she would wear the mark as a badge of honor. Cersei, still conspiring to have her husband killed, convinced her cousin, Lancel Lannister, to bring fortified wine during a hunting trip with the king to ensure Robert was properly drunk and less able to defend himself. While Robert was away, Eddard Stark met with the Queen and revealed that he'd learned the truth about her children's origins and warned her that he would tell the king upon his return, advising that she take her children and leave the capital at once, lest Robert kill them all in his rage. But Cersei had no intention of leaving the city, further bolstered by the words of Sansa Stark, who'd come to her and confessed that her father was making arrangements to send his daughters out of the city. Fortunately for the Queen, her schemes against her husband at last paid off, and Robert returned fatally wounded from his hunt. Ned Stark, unable to tell his friend the truth in his final hours, attempted to seize the Iron Throne by other means in the name of the true heir Stannis Baratheon. But he was betrayed by Petyr Baelish, leading to the arrest of the Hand of the King. Cersei had successfully defended the Lannister position in King's Landing, and so began to consolidate power as Queen Regent for her young son, King Joffrey Baratheon. Ultimately, Cersei did not harm Eddard Stark, knowing this would make war with the North inevitable, and so made a deal to have him sent to the Wall in exchange for his confession and repentance. But her son proved impulsive and reckless, ignoring his mother's wishes and ordering the execution of the Lord of the North. As a result, conflict erupted all over the continent in the War of the Five Kings, and so Cersei requested aid from her father Tywin, who was marching his armies to the Riverlands to deal with Stark and Tully forces. Unable to go south at the moment, Tywin sent his youngest son, the clever dwarf Tyrion Lannister, in his place to serve as temporary Hand of the King to put the capital city in order. Cersei, however, was unwilling to give up control, especially to her hated little brother, and so the two struggled for power, with Tyrion proving the wiser and more strategically gifted of the two, even poisoning the Queen so she might be bedridden for a time. After discovering that Grand Maester Pycelle was spying for his sister, Tyrion had him arrested, then making arrangements for Cersei's daughter, Myrcella, to wed Tristan Martell in order to secure the allegiance of Dorne. When the Queen attempted to send her son Tommen to safety, away from the city in advance of the invasion of King's Landing by Stannis Baratheon, Tyrion again interfered, capturing the child before he could leave, and then using the boy as a hostage to prevent Cersei from torturing a prostitute who she wrongly believed was in a relationship with Tyrion. During the Battle of Blackwater Bay, Cersei invited all the noble ladies of court to dine with her in the Red Keep. However, she also invited Sir Ilyn Payne, who was instructed to kill the women in case of defeat to prevent their capture by the enemy. As the fighting raged on, the Queen became worried for her son, the King, and sent for him to be taken to safety. However, after seeing their ruler retreat from the front lines, the city defense forces lost morale and began to lose control of the Mudgate. Although Tyrion did everything possible to bolster their defenses, making Stannis pay for every inch of the city, the Lannister forces were on the verge of defeat until Tywin Lannister and Randyll Tarly led a combined army from the Westerlands and Reach as reinforcements pushing Stannis back out to sea and saving King's Landing. Tyrion, who'd been injured in the fighting, was attacked by a Kingsguard and was convinced Cersei was responsible, though it may have actually been his nephew, King Joffrey. Tyrion was unconscious for several days, and when he awoke, discovered that Cersei had taken the opportunity to make herself seem like the hero who kept the city together, while Tyrion was blamed for any problems. Her focus then turned to preparing for her son Joffrey's wedding to Lady Margaery Tyrell, daughter of Mace Tyrell, in order to cement their new alliance. But Joffrey was poisoned during the wedding feast, with a grief-stricken Cersei blaming Tyrion for the murder and having him arrested. Sansa Stark, Tyrion's wife, was also ordered arrested, but she'd already escaped King's Landing with the aid of Littlefinger, who once again was behind the intrigue, working with the Tyrells to assassinate the king. Tyrion demanded trial by combat, with Oberyn Martell serving as his champion against Sir Gregor Clegane, but in the end, Oberyn was killed in the fighting. Tyrion was set to be executed, but was rescued by his brother Jaime with the help of Varys, who aided in his escape. But the youngest Lannister sibling did not leave the city right away, first murdering the prostitute Shae and his father Tywin with a crossbow before departing. Cersei, enraged by Tyrion's escape and devastated by the loss of her father, was left bitter, resentful, and paranoid, beginning to rely more heavily on alcohol. With 8-year-old Tommen now serving as king, Cersei was able to yield considerable influence once more, using her position to make several rash decisions in an attempt to consolidate power and eliminate enemies. She began by arranging the death of the High Septon, then burning the Tower of the Hand with wildfire. She put a bounty on Tyrion's head, resulting in the deaths of many innocents, and surrounded herself with sycophants and flatterers, ignoring the advice of knowledgeable and experienced noblemen like her uncle Kevan Lannister. She also became increasingly dependent on Qyburn, a discredited maester best known for his immoral experiments on humans, even naming him Master of Whisperers after the disappearance of Varys. This behavior led to an ever-increasing rift between Cersei and Jaime, who did not approve of her actions, and so left King's Landing, going to deal with rebellion in the Riverlands, where he joined the siege of Riverrun, doing his part to retake the stronghold for House Lannister. With no one left to temper Cersei's paranoia and offer wise counsel, she began to spiral out of control. When Qyburn informed her that a golden coin with the sigil of House Gardner was found in the dungeon where Tyrion was being held, Cersei began to suspect that House Tyrell was involved in his escape. With Margaery marrying young Tommen to become the new queen, Cersei believed they were seeking to undermine her power and ruin her house, and so she set out to destroy the Tyrells and secure her position in the city. As acting queen regent and head of the small council, Cersei decided the Seven Kingdoms was no longer able to pay its debts, greatly angering the Faith of the Seven, to whom they owed money, as well as the Iron Bank of Braavos, who in response called in all debts from the families of Westeros, refusing to give out any new loans. This action sent the continent into economic chaos, while Cersei used the money saved to build a great naval fleet, entrusting command of the ships to Aurane Waters, known as the Bastard of Driftmark, in the hopes of appeasing the faith and creating a local militia that could aid in her schemes. The Queen Regent allowed the new High Septon, a man of the people known as the High Sparrow, to revive the Order of Faith Militants, an armed faction of the church that could be used to enforce religious values in the city. Cersei then hatched a plot to bring back her daughter from Dorne, sending Sir Balon Swan with a letter inviting Prince Doran to take up a seat in the small council and asking that Myrcella and Trystane come for a visit. In truth, however, she was planning to set a trap, having their party ambushed, killing Trystane and framing Tyrion for the crime. Cersei then befriended Taena Merryweather, a woman of questionable loyalty who became her new bedwarmer and personal advisor. With Loras Tyrell injured during the siege of Dragonstone, Cersei focused her attention on Margaery Tyrell, convincing Osnay Kettleblack to confess to the High Sparrow that he committed fornication with Queen Margaery. However, the High Sparrow found the confession suspicious and tortured him until the whole truth was revealed, including Cersei's crimes. Both Margaery and Cersei were arrested by the Faith, and with the Queen Regent removed from power, government ministers were able to seize control of the city, recalling Kevan Lannister to act as the new regent. During her incarceration, many of Cersei's poorly developed plans fell apart, with Olraine Waters abandoning the Seven Kingdoms and stealing the new royal fleet to serve as his personal navy. Meanwhile, her last remaining allies were gone, with Cersei's companion Taena forced to flee the city and Jaime refusing her summons, choosing to stay in the Riverlands rather than return to help. Her Dornish schemes also fell apart, with Prince Doran discovering her plans and refusing to fall into her trap. Cersei, desperate to have contact with the outside world, chose to confess to the High Sparrow, stating she had relations with her cousin, Lancel, and all three of the Kettleblack brothers, but continued to deny the charges of treason against her late husband or any involvement in the murder of the previous High Septon. After confessing, she was granted an audience with Kevan Lannister, who informed her of current events. Cersei asked that Kevan relay a message to her man Qyburn, informing him that the time had come to unveil his creation. Cersei was then stripped of all her clothes and forced to walk naked in the streets, while the small folk insulted and ridiculed her, covering her in rotten food and feces. Unwilling to show any signs of shame, she walked with dignity until the very last moments before entering the Red Keep, when she broke down into tears. Once behind the Red Walls, Qyburn introduced her to the newest member of the Kingsguard, Sir Robert Strong, a mysterious knight covered from head to toe in white armor, said to have taken a vow of silence, refusing to speak until the land was purged of evil. In truth, many suspected this monster was the reanimated corpse of Gregor Clegane, revived with dark magic. With this new champion, Cersei would be able to defend herself in a trial by combat, giving her hope she might not be found guilty. After such a harrowing ordeal, the former Queen Regent was subdued and seemingly humbled, dining with her uncle Kevan and son Tommen, asking meekly if Taena Merryweather might be allowed to return to the city after the trial. Kevan Lannister, meanwhile, was working diligently to repair the damage done by Cersei's time in power, and was proving a competent leader and worthy successor to his brother Tywin. However, it was because of the promise he showed that Varys the Spider re-emerged, arranging the death of Grand Maester Pycelle and shooting Kevan Lannister with a crossbow, then sending children he called little birds to finish him off. Although Varys had nothing personal against the man, his own loyalties were to another, and so deemed it necessary to eliminate any potential figures of stability in order to keep the realm in chaos. A special thanks to all those who contribute to Civilization X, like Nantine the Blackburned Ewido, Galvaelra 8 Hands, and Ryanon. If you'd like to help the channel with a monthly donation, click on the Patreon link, and please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to see more.